Hello, welcome to the James Cooley Show. It's your life. I'm your host, Dr. James J.C. Cooley. And guess what? Today is Thursday. We've got a special guest host that's on. I always on Thursday, Paula Shaw. And what we're talking about in her episode of the show, her is bridges beyond grief. And she always bring a special, important, absolutely fantastic guest on to talk about a lot of things that we're going to talk about today. And I tell you what, Paula, how you doing? How you doing today?
I'm doing great, James. Thursday's my favorite day because I get to hang with you guys.
And I tell you what, we got this absolutely fantastic guest, but we're not going to give them away right now because I want to lock all the platforms in at the same time.
Okay.
And I tell you what, hey Todd, how you doing back in our California studios? I'm ready to lock everything in, bro.
I am too. I'm excited for today's show. We're starting here in 3 seconds. Ready to lock them in?
Let's do it.
It's Your Life is sponsored by James J.C. Cooley.
Hello. Welcome to the James Cooley Show. It's your life. I'm your host, Dr. James J.C. Cooley. And I tell you what, anytime Todd is playing that bouncy music, that means that we have made it through most of the week. and I'm my producers back at KCBQ, AM 1170, FM 96.1, K Praise. Always put us in the mood for the show that we got today. And we got Paula Shaw talking about bridges beyond grief. And she got this absolutely fantastic, extraordinary guest that's going to be on the show today. And I tell you what, I'm looking forward to having and just sitting back, Paula, on Thursday, I'm just going to sit back and watch most of it, but I'm going to ask a few questions and get a chance to know this great guest. Did I give it away? I did not call his name. The thing, but I don't see Michelle, so I'm not in trouble. All right, now, so Paul, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great today, JC. As I always say, Thursday's my favorite day because I get to come and hang with you and Michelle, and we get to bring great people and great information to our listeners and our viewers, and that's just fun.
That is so fun, and for people that's tuning in, I tell you what, if you're watching us on E36 TV, Transfer, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and over 69 other live platforms, including KCBQ, AM 1170, Answer FM 96.1 Radio, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Rumble. Welcome to the show. If you want to be part of the conversation, all you have to do is just go to the comments on whichever platform that you're watching us on, and I promise you we'll get you an answer. So Paula, I guess you're gonna have to introduce Michelle. I don't know if she's back or not, but
she's back. I see her. Michelle.
No, she having issues. So.
She's having some issues.
But Paula, can you please introduce the title of the show and the purpose of the show, and introduce this absolutely fantastic guest that we got?
Well, I will start, JC, with a personal experience. The way I met Dylan Bender, who is our truly amazing guest today, is that my dad went for help after 66 years of suffering with PTSD from the invasion of Normandy in World War II. He finally decided to try to get some help. He went to the VA, and the therapist that was assigned to him was Dylan Bender. And thank you, God, that happened, because my dad never told anybody about the hallucinations and the visions and the night terrors that he was going through. Because when he was a kid, by the way, he was 18 at the time of the invasion of Normandy. And he had done some training. He was a medic. So when they were preparing for the invasion, part of his training was in a psych ward. And he was so terrified that if he told anybody about the things he was happening or having experienced with the PTSD, he was afraid they'd put him in a psych ward. So he didn't tell anybody for years. And his first session with Dylan, the way he tells the story, Dylan took him through some memories that were very painful. And then Dylan said, each week, this is like an iceberg. And each week we're going to chip away at a little more and a little more and a little more. So I'll see you next week. And Dad says in his mind, he went, the hell you will. I'm not doing that again. I don't know if Dylan even knows that story. But thankfully, Dad went back. And each week they did chip away at more and more and more. And today, my dad likes to say he's cured of PTSD. And that's the word he uses. He's cured. And this is the man who helped him do it. So I have the highest regard for him. I know Michelle has the actual bio, which I do not have printed out. So there are going to be some things that we'll have to ask Dylan about when we start talking to him. But I do know this, he is no longer at the VA clinic. He is now the director of veteran affairs at Irvine Valley College. And as he said to me the other day, I'm so excited about this new work, Paula, because now I get to help them before their lives fall apart.
Wow. I tell you what, Michelle's having problems. I can't do it like Michelle, but let me try to bring a little justice about this great guest that we got on here. Dylan Bender. Hey, thanks for your service, Dylan. Dylan Bender is the director of Veteran Service at Irvine Valley High School.
Valley College.
Valley College. I told you Michelle does all this. So dedicated his life to supporting veterans as they navigate through challenges like PTSD and other illness that they might have attained during whatever services or whatever conflicts that might have arose. This guy works closely with the active duty members as well. Work closely with a lot of other organizations. And I tell you what, this is what we're going to do, Paula. We're going to bring on this absolutely fantastic guest and let him tell his story. So without any further ado, welcome to the show, Dylan Bender.
And we did forget to mention that Dylan is a Marine. He served his country in the Marine Corps as well.
Well, we're Dylan gonna tell this story. I mean, we're gonna give him about 3 minutes, and you know what? 3 minutes to just tell our audience who you are. So, Dylan, can you please tell our viewers and our listeners who you are?
Absolutely.
What inspired you to go in the Marine Corps? Why you're so passionate about the things that you're doing? Just like Paula just mentioned, her father. And can you enlighten us a little bit more?
Absolutely. First off, it's a privilege to be here and a privilege to share and talk with you. So it all kind of started, obviously, as I joined the Marine Corps because it was just as I just wanted to have the challenge and I wasn't sure what I was going to do as I graduated high school. And I joined the Marine Corps, went into the Marine Corps, and 1997 was the year I joined. So it was a peacetime Marine Corps outside of a few small skirmishes that were going on. And in that time of joining the Marine Corps, I became an infantryman, and I loved being an infantryman. It really truly formed me. I don't know. I didn't realize at that point of how much it had formed me, but it had formed me. And then from there, they got me twice. I re-enlisted, and then from there I went over to reconnaissance and became a reconnaissance Marine. And then 9/11 kicked off and all of that. And then we had the multiple deployments. And in about 2005, they got me for 2 enlistments, and I just gotten married at the end of my Marine Corps career, and I knew I just felt called out. One, as partly I was injured too, so that kind of helped. And I knew being a reconnaissance Marine, they were pretty much like, you're probably going to have to go back to a line company. And that was not my desire to go back to a line company. And I really did feel called out. And so I got out in 2005 and I went to school. But just like many former military that are enlisted going to school, is I just started to have to figure out what am I doing here? Where am I going? Like, why am I here? But in that time, this really explains, as I was really searching, many of my buddies who either had gotten out and went back to whatever state they were from, or they had stayed in and they were struggling, with just the constant redeployments and stuff. So I'm getting phone calls from friends who had stayed in or who'd gotten out, and just a lot of friends were really struggling, and they were in the military. And I personally, they were calling me, and I was like, I don't know why you're calling me, but I just don't hurt yourself. And so that's all I knew what to do. And from there on, I saw that there was a huge need. And the need, this is about in 2007. So obviously it's in the surge that's building. And so I see the need, and I did from there determined that I will now make an effort to go back and impact that world. So I graduated with my undergraduate and then moved back down to Southern California, and I did a clinical psychology degree so that I could get back in. Now, funny story about that is when I was first applying, I was taking a clinical psychology degree, and I was like, I applied to all these graduate schools, and I got into a graduate school that specialized you with an MFT, a marriage and family therapy. And I was like, well, sure, I like relationships. I'll do that. Yeah, that works. Will it get me back working with the veterans? And they're like, yeah, sure. And so I got in, and unwittingly, I got this clinical psychology degree with a specialization in marriage and family therapy. And in hindsight, I am so glad that happened, because after I graduated, even before I graduated, I was interning and hired at the VA doing clinical psychology through the readjustment program of the vet center. And so I was doing exactly what I wanted to do. I was back in the field helping vets, giving back, because I wanted to feel like that we can't just come back from war and then not help them and not carry out like after the war. And so little caveat, why I got that marriage and family therapy degree was so valuable, because many of my generation. Go ahead.
Dylan, hold that though. We got to take a station break. But when we get back, I'm turning it over to Paula Shaw and give you an opportunity to continue to explain about that third degree, so our viewers can just lock in on. But I tell you what, this is already a fantastic show. And if you want to be part of the conversation, whichever platform that you are watching or listening to us on 69 different platforms live, welcome to the show. If you want to be part of the conversation, all you do, just go to the platform that you're watching us on, go to the comments, ask any question that you might have, or pick up the phone and dial 1-888-344-1170. Again, that's 1-888-344-1170. It's your life, and we'll see you shortly after the break.
There's more stories of greatness to help you overcome adversity coming up on It's Your Life with James Cooley.
A black man's
The James Cooley Show. It's your life. That's right.
Really get a chance to know who you are. And once you know who you are, you truly know who you are, love who you are. Love who you are. You're a masterpiece. Love who you are. Love who you were born to be. Love me some me. That's what I'm talking about. When you leave high school, you gotta know today or tomorrow, or hopefully today, what your plans are. Hopefully, there is no bad decision unless there is no plan. Create, collaborate, commit with confidence. Commit with what? Commit with what? And everything that you do.
insights in our next generation of leaders and heroes, get your copy of Country Boy, City Boy, A Journey That Ain't Over Yet by James J.C. Cooley, available on Amazon and everywhere books are sold.
Hello. Welcome back to the James Cooley Show. It's your life. And as I mentioned to you Thursday, we're talking about Bridges Beyond Grief, and Paula Shaw is getting ready to take over. But, just like Paula, you already know that every first segment, we want the viewers and our listeners to get an understanding of the absolutely fantastic guests that you bring on.
Yes.
And this guy is tremendous. Just listen to his story. And I want to give him an opportunity to explain his story, but I'm turning it over to you, Paula. So you got it.
Oh, righty. Thank you, JC. Dylan was just talking about, if you're just joining us, he was just talking about how perfect it was that when he went back to school after service in the Marine Corps, that he got a degree as a marriage family therapist. And he was about to tell us exactly why that degree was so perfect. And by the way, one of the things we neglected to mention when we were first introducing Dylan is he is also the author of a wonderful book called The Warrior's Dilemma, which we will be talking about during this interview today. So Dylan, why was that MFT degree such a perfect one for you?
It was a perfect one because especially my generation of warriors, many of them would not come in for like selves, like it was my issue. Most of them would come in, but they would come in for their relationship. They would come in their relationship far earlier than they would come in for themselves, because they would say something's wrong with us, not something's wrong with me. And what that became is an amazing bridge that helped them bridge into the point that they'd say, hey, maybe we could talk sometime. Or we would say, that's an interesting behavior you have, in the sense you're acting that way or you reacted that way. What's behind that? And then we use that avenue to improve their felt need, which is the relationship, to ultimately get them to the real need. So that was so key for me to get that marriage and family therapy, even though it was a rough road, because going from Marine Corps reconnaissance and that realm to then sitting in a classroom, learning about relationship and empathy and feelings and all those things, it definitely had its ups and downs in trying to get there. But I did find that I finally found my groove, figured it out, and got to a spot where it was really helpful in that. But go ahead, ask a question.
I was just going to say, we had a guest a few weeks back who told us that more veterans get divorced after they get home than what during service. Do you find that kind of a statistic to be true?
Yes, anecdotally and research-wise is that, and there's not a lot of research to tracking both of them, but there is a substantial increase in the rate of divorce after leaving the military service versus with a few specific MOSs that are separate from that. Some specific MOSs have a higher rate while they're in, but in the general population of the military, it is divorce after leaving. And it makes sense. I've really had to dig into this a lot. Is oftentimes, more often than not, military will get married for incentives. And so there's an incentivizing of getting married, from getting out of the barracks to getting extra money to feeling like you have a place to go away from the military lifestyle. So there's multiple different things that make that alluring. And then the problem is it creates a level of security, because you get extra benefits, you get extra support, the spouse's children get TRICARE, all these different things. But then once you leave that world, once you leave that culture, then all of a sudden there's a vacuum, because now the veteran can go to the VA and get a service-connected disability and get health care, medical care, and everything. But unless he gets 100%, the wife and children don't get anything. And so there becomes there's a lot of loopholes. And more than that, if the veteran, after he leaves, now all of a sudden goes from a place of strength and then now he's struggling. So let alone life circumstances are flipped on their head.
Right.
Now you have a veteran who is deeply struggling on their own as they're
Uh-huh.
going through their own struggles of trying to figure out, what am I going to do now that I'm in the civilian world? And
Mhm.
they start potentially to spin out with some of those difficulties. They actually call this, technically, it's called transition stress. And then
Yes.
transition stress is, I mean, there's research that's out there that transition stress, the Journal of Suicidology did a research back in 2018 where it identified transition stress was more of an indicator of suicidal ideation than PTSD and depression combined.
Oh my gosh. And I want you to share an analogy that you told me a while back that I think is such a perfect one, because I think it really helps us understand what is the problem? What is the core of this transition stress? And I think the title of your book, The Warrior's Dilemma, is so perfect because it really describes this. But remember the analogy about sheep and sheepdogs?
Yes.
Please share
Yes.
that with our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just a little definition in the sense of dilemma. The reason I picked the warrior's dilemma is because when we leave military service, there's a dilemma that's at hand. Is the strongest part of us, which is like that military, that warrior that's been built up, is
Mhm.
often the strongest part of who we are. But then we leave that and we come back into the civilian world, and oftentimes a warrior has hard times. They don't often play well with others in the civilian world, and so it can create more problems.
Right.
And so the dilemma goes, do I let go of the strongest thing that was part of my strongest
Mhm.
identity, or do I now just embrace becoming a civilian so I can have a healthy life? So there's this kind of moral dilemma that goes on, and that's
Mhm.
what the book begins to unpack. And the
Mhm.
metaphor I often use is, it's very classic. Grossman came up with the idea of there's three types of people in the world. There's sheep, which would just say the general populace that's kind of doing their life, kind of going along, being led. And then there's wolves, and then those typically those are the people that seek to prey on the sheep. They are hunting the sheep, trying to steal from the sheep, attack the sheep. Those wolves are there. And then you have the sheepdogs. And then sheepdogs are traditionally, this has been used for law enforcement, those who are going out to try and protect the sheep. It doesn't have to
Mhm.
be law enforcement. Anybody can be those who are out there trying to protect the sheep and to find the wolves. And this is where
Mhm.
the metaphor stretches a little differently, is because if you imagine we're taking the sheep and we make them into sheepdogs, but we put them in a pack, and then we send them out and we make them very aggressive, and we teach them to pack hunt wolves, and we
Ah,
send them out to find as many wolves as they possibly can and be very aggressive about it. And then we bring these pack sheepdogs back, and then they were back here in the world, and then we put them back in with the sheep. There's bound to be some struggles in that. We've
sure.
made them to these sheepdogs in a pack, and then we've put them back in and almost help them kind of be a sheep again. There's
Right.
just a huge dilemma that takes place in that, and it makes it really, really hard. I will tell you this, just a little backstory on it is, as I was, because I've done all my clinical experience in combat readjustment. I mean, I've just passed the 25,000 clinical hours of doing
Mhm.
combat readjustment and things. So it's like probably about the 5,000 hour, I began to see, like, I was taught traditionally, like, everything's PTSD, 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 PTSD.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
during we're right after the war, so it's kind of like the main emphasis. It's PTSD, it's PTSD. And as I started to getting into this and I started treating guys, I was like, well, there's more. I can treat PTSD. I can reduce PTSD and get to a point where it's like manageable and not create problems in their life. But then there's this whole other thing. There's this whole other thing is like, but this person's still struggling. Why are they struggling? It's not PTSD. It's not a combat related injury. What's going on? And that's when I started noticing, I started digging that there's something more going on. And unfortunately, there's lots of books coming out about PTSD, and I never really had sought out to write a book. It wasn't like on my bucket list. It was just, I just kept seeing of like everything's PTSD, and there's potentially a negative consequence when we're calling everything PTSD and there's something else going on. Now, don't get me wrong, PTSD is a very real thing, very life-impairing, and we are not taken away from that. But there can be another thing going on, and I almost call it the trifecta. The trifecta, which is, it's when we give out, we struggle with identity of who we are. We struggle with meaning and purpose. And then we struggle with that loss of culture and camaraderie. And so those three areas, they kind of all work together. And then I can treat PTSD, but then I started going, well, how do I treat identity? How do I treat purpose and meaning?
Right.
And then what I found is I could treat and reduce PTSD only to the point that once PTSD was reduced, then it was like it's like I cleared all the stuff out of the hole, but then I didn't put anything back in there. They didn't get to the meaning and the purpose. What happens is the PTSD was sloughed back into the hole. Not to say that they would all of a sudden have PTSD again. It's more of like PTSD became an honorable way to say why I'm stuck. I'm stuck because of what I've done for my country. I'm stuck because because there's ultimately something that is holding them back, that it's not PTSD. But if they don't know what else to call it and they don't know what to do with it, then they have an honorable reason to say, I'll just be stuck. And look, I'm getting 100% service connection from the VA, so I must be really messed up and broken.
Hey, Dylan, hold that thought.
Wow.
We got to take a station break, but we're going to come back and we're going to continue this conversation. I tell you, wherever you are watching us at around the world, or wherever you're watching us at, if you want to be part of the conversation, just go to the platform that you're watching us on, go to the comments, ask any question that you might have. Or if you're listening to us on KCB, AM 1170, The Answer, FM 96.1, iHeart, Spotify, or other live stations, all you have to do is pick up the phone and dial 1-888-344-1170. Again, that's 1-888-344-1170. It's your life, and we'll see you shortly after the break.
There's more stories of greatness to help you overcome adversity coming up on It's Your Life with James Cooley.
Craving a slice of Chicago right here in Temecula wine country? Then dive into legendary Chicago deep dish style pizza at Rosati's Pizza Pub. Piled high with gooey cheese, rich tomato sauce, and your favorite toppings, Rosati's delivers the taste of the Windy City right to your table or front door. Enjoy the cozy pub atmosphere and an impressive selection of Temecula wines. Come on down to Rosati's Pizza Pub for your slice of Chicago right here on Rancho California Road, or order online at myrosatis.com. Rosati's, where Chicago deep dish pizza meets Temecula charm.
For those looking to improve their lives, there's nobody better to turn to than Paula Shaw. Paula helps people regain successful lives by identifying and eliminating self-sabotaging behavior using a multitude of mind-body techniques to identify and resolve their core issues. Working with a wide variety of healing modalities, she provides her clients with the most effective process for their specific needs. To book a session with Paula, call 858-480-9234. That's 858-480-9234.
Available on Amazon and everywhere books are sold.
The JC.
Noah Dingley here, producer of The James Cooley Show, It's Your Life. And the new audio version of James' book, Country Boy, City Boy, A Journey That Ain't Over Yet, is a must-have. James shares his true life story of struggle and success in America. It's both a cautionary tale and a roadmap to achieving the American dream. Get the new audio version of Country Boy, City Boy, A Journey That Ain't Over Yet by James Cooley on Amazon.com or wherever audiobooks are sold.
Dr. James J.C. Cooley from the United States of America, and I am here to just say, first of all, I'm so happy and honored to be on it, to be in the Coffee Book 2023, Unified Brain Z, and the other organizations. Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to be a part of this collection. Hello. Welcome back to the James Cooley Show. It's your life. And I tell you what, this is an absolutely fantastic topic that we're talking about. It touches me because I served 23 years in the military. And a lot of things that Dylan is talking about, especially when it comes to disability, PTSD, when it comes to service, percentage, 100% permanent total. He had mentioned earlier that if a service member can have 100%, however, if it's not permanent total, the family members might not contribute from a lot of the benefits that's there. And in addition, PTSD is very common, and it causes suicide. I know we ain't touched on the suicide portion right now. But my question to you, Dylan, is there is a major rise, especially our military veterans and some military folks as well, as it relates to suicide. And I know that you deal with PTSD patients all the time. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit and how we could kind of, some of the recommendations that you might have as a counselor and been dealing with this that could educate our viewers and our public on how to kind of reduce that.
And before you do, Dylan, if I could just ask you, because some people may be just joining us, could you quickly review those 3 areas, the problematic areas? Because I think it's that combination that leads to the suicide issue that is unfortunately so prominent with our veterans.
Absolutely. And just like that study I kind of shared with you, this journal Suicidology that studied this, they highlighted that transition stress, that transition from leaving the military and entering back in the civilian world, is a major indicator of suicide ideation, which is the sense of thinking about it and fixating on it, and then having a higher potential to follow through with it. And when this journal and more research is showing that when transition stress is unaddressed, it is more problematic than PTSD and suicide, or PTSD and depression. And so then we have to define what is transition stress, and there's multiple components. It is loss of meaning and purpose. It is the loss of an identity. Who am I? And Dr. James Cooley says great thing. When you spend 23 years and you get up and you're an officer, you're an 06, or you're a master chief, it absorbs so much of your identity of who you are. And then you get out and nobody's calling you master chief. Nobody's calling you sir anymore. And it's just like, who am I when I'm not that? Yeah. And so identity is a vacuum. Identity is a vacuum that we are drawn to where our strongest identity was. And so we are drawn to, and if we don't have a stronger identity to lean to, we get stuck. We get stuck on this identity. And then if we have PTSD on top of that, now it creates more and more problems, because PTSD by itself is just very problematic to doing normal things in life. And so I go back to identity, loss of purpose and meaning, and loss of a culture and camaraderie. And it's interesting that we bring this up. I will bring it back to suicide, but if we bring up those 3, those three, and I'm hearing it more and more of like, what I was presenting at a youth conference and they come up and that, you know what, that's what youth are struggling with today. And I said,
Yes.
that's very true. But I said, it's different. Hear me out on this. Imagine youth are, especially Gen Z, and they realize they're on the merry-go-round of life. And it's kind of like, it's just a merry-go-round. There's got to be more. And they're just rolling around the merry-go-round and going, there's got to be more of the life. But it's different for veterans. They got off the merry-go-round, and they got off the merry-go-round of life, and they went and got on the roller coaster. And they rode that roller coaster for 4 years, for 23 years. They rode the roller coaster, and then they get out of the military. Essentially, they get off the roller coaster and they say, go get back on the merry-go-round. Well, for the veteran, they're acutely aware of what they're missing.
Right.
And that by itself can be just this major shock to the system. And so it's like the idea of just getting back on that merry-go-round. And so they know that they're missing a meaning and purpose. They know that they're missing identity, culture and camaraderie. That's even harder. Very often when a vet comes into my office and I'll ask them of like, hey, how many friends do you have? And they'll be like, oh, I have a bunch. And then we start the processing down. I was like, okay, tell me, do you have any friends that are not of your old buddies from the military? And they're like, well, no. Okay. Do you have any friends that live in the state? And they're like, oh, there's more. There's others that, live out of the state. It's like, but I don't have any live in the state. And then you take it back and you pretty much, they have no proximity friends.
Yes.
They're isolated because oftentimes, let's face it, the way we learned how to make friends is put us in a fighting hole, let it rain on us, and let us suffer together, and we'll bond. And it's forced friendship. But then nobody teaches us how do I make friends now?
Right.
How do I build those friendships? How do I do that? And so what happens, one of the greatest indicators of suicidal ideation is isolation.
Yes.
Because oftentimes isolation, alienation.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know who
and
I
could
am
go
anymore. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so why this is, and there's two things that I think Dr. Cooley brought up was like that with suicide is there is what we would say is there's the felt need, and felt need's one thing, and then there's the real need. But let me differentiate. The felt need often, more often than not, is often like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know where I'm going. I'm not being successful. Failure and shame are often a big felt need. But then the other one is, this is a startling statistic that usually 49% of suicide follow-throughs are precipitated by relationship failure or loss.
Wow.
There is nothing even close to that. The next closest is like 12%. 12% of suicide follow-throughs was maybe legal problems. And then it drops down, and I think PTSD is like something like 4 to 6%. But there's no greater indicator of a suicide attempt than relationship loss or failure, or distress, even if they had a big fight. And I would say that's the data. Anecdotally, what I experienced in all the years of doing the counseling with vets, it's got to be more of around 70%, because the vets that I had, they were the most suicidal, that where I was like, oh no, I don't know if they're going to make it. It was the relationship problems. Now, I'm not saying that's the cause. Go ahead.
Hold that though.
Absolutely.
We got to pay the bills.
Absolutely.
So we got to take a station break. And I tell you what, I want you to come back and pick that up, because your point, what you just made, is so fantastic. And our viewers and our listeners need to understand that. I tell you what, it's not too late to join the party. Todd, he gonna throw something on there in a minute. It's still a party. Party meaning that we are educating ourselves, we're having fun, and we're understanding what this great guest is talking about. So if you want to be part of the conversation, I'll make it easy for you. All you have to do is pick up your phone, dial 1-888-344-1170. Again, that's 1-888-344-1170. Let me give you applause. So we'll be back shortly after church. We'll see you then.
There's more stories of greatness to help you overcome adversity. Coming up on It's Your Life with James Cooley.
A black man's point of view is
the James Cooley Show. It's your life. That's right.
For those looking to improve their lives, there's nobody better to turn to than Paula Shaw. Paula helps people regain successful lives by identifying and eliminating self-sabotaging behavior using a multitude of mind-body techniques to identify and resolve their core issues. Working with a wide variety of healing modalities, she provides her clients with the most effective process for their specific needs. To book a session with Paula, call 858-480-9234. That's 858-480-9234.
beliefs.
Craving a slice of Chicago right here in Temecula wine country? Then dive into legendary Chicago deep dish style pizza at Rosati's Pizza Pub. Piled high with gooey cheese, rich tomato sauce, and your favorite toppings, Rosati's delivers the taste of the Windy City right to your table or front door. Enjoy the cozy pub atmosphere and an impressive selection of Temecula wines. Come on down to Rosati's Pizza Pub for your slice of Chicago right here on Rancho California Road, or order online at myrosatis.com. Rosati's, where Chicago deep dish pizza meets Temecula charm.
It's the James Cooley Show. It's your life.
Hello. Welcome back to the James Cooley Show. It's your life. And I tell you, Paula, I am thoroughly enjoying this guest, the information that he's providing. I mean, one of the reasons why I get it, because I spent 23 years in the service, and I'm 100% permanent total. I know exactly what he's talking about.
Yeah.
I know that many might not, because they don't understand. And if they understand what he's talking about and a lot of other things, they might want to go back and revisit whoever is working with them on their packages of previous. If they don't have one, there is no limitation on how far you can go back. And Dylan can talk about that a little bit, because that's so important.
And you know what, James? It's also in his book, The Warrior's Dilemma. He goes into this very topic, which he's been discussing on the show today. And, you know, it's a very interesting book to put out to help.
I want to put that up front. But hey, Todd, what you think about the show? What happened to Todd? What you think about the show so far?
Great show. You know, nowadays superhero movies and TVs shows are real popular, but to me, the real superheroes are the servicemen and women of this great country. And so I love that, Dylan is out there and there's other services for them that help the real heroes of this country. Great show. Let's get right back to it.
We're going to get right back to it. And I'm going to turn it back over to Paul and Michelle. Michelle, I think you got a question, but I'm going to step to this.
So I want to know, with your book, Dylan, The Warrior's Dilemma, first of all, can you summarize exactly what takeaways that you want the readers to get from this book?
Absolutely. So two things is I wrote it as for it was writing it for a service member who is out and they're just starting to struggle and they're running into that. But I've been getting a lot of feedback from the family members or those who parents or children that are connected to a service member that it just opened a window to understanding why is he struggling so much? Why is it he still acts this way, or she? Why is it they still do these certain things? They've been out of the military for 20 years. Why are they still doing this? Just to really help them understand and illuminate, like, what is it that goes into making a warfighter? And why is it that it's such a difficult process that once we leave, that it doesn't just reset? And so the first thing is for veterans, because again, just like James Cooley, it's like I got my service connection permanent and total, and I'm glad I have that. But the thing is the mindset to where we as veterans is that the message to veterans would be that hey, we are not broken. We are what we are made to be, and that's often what creates a lot of problems for us is we are what our government created us to be. But now we have to adapt. And now once we adapt, we can unlock tremendous potential.
Yes.
And I do think Paula, there's such a tremendous story here. And the tremendous story, and I'm so glad we asked that question because the story of that is really almost your dad. And I wanted to share on the sense of the experience on this side of it. So I want to make sure I have time to share as the counselor working with somebody that is going through this. But I was so glad we talked about this and you said this one is on grief. Because a lot of people do not connect grief to transition. They do not connect it to PTSD. They don't connect it to any of that. So I did want to kind of loop that in because I feel it is really important when I first started in this field, I was so terrified that I was going to screw people up. And I'm like, oh no, what am I going to do? Thankfully, I had a Green Beret Vietnam vet who had been doing this clinical work for like 30 years with the VA. He took me under wing. He was my clinical supervisor. And I was like, he started sitting me down with Vietnam vets. And I was like, what do I need to know? And he's like, Vietnam vets, you got to help them understand they need to grieve. And I'm like, I wasn't expecting that because we are 45 years from Vietnam and you're telling me they need to grieve? And that just started me down that path of trying to understand is like, why do they need to grieve? What is it? Interesting research, and I'm not sure, it's research with grief. So as many know, like after post-war, a big epidemic came out that was kind of became a derivative or what was thought to be a derivative of PTSD, and it was survivor's guilt. And if you've ever worked with survivor's guilt, it's almost irrational. It's like, what? You're like, I should have been on that patrol. And you're like, what? They were with a different unit in a different AO. Why would you ever go on that patrol? That's ridiculous thing. But what we learned as they understood and as we dug into survivor's guilt is not guilt at all. Survivor's guilt is, if you trace back, and survivor's guilt is unresolved grief.
Grief? Yes.
And when grief was not addressed, it's like when you have grief and you have that emotion of loss, it's natural to say, I have to process this. I have to work this through. If you care about something, that's makes sense. When you're in a combat zone, it's like, hey, push on. Maybe we'll do a battlefield ceremony, but then get back on because we don't want you getting too much in your head because that may harm other people. And so it's like, so grief kind of gets stamped out. And then what happens is we start seeing it. It starts It's the brain bringing it up, and it turns it and it morphs into guilt. It's not guilt. They're guilty of nothing. If they're guilty of anything, it's the only thing that they didn't mourn the loss of their loved one, their friend.
Mhm.
And
Boy, that's
but now
huge.
this is where, go ahead, Paula.
No, you finish your point. It's so huge.
This is where it gets tricky, though. This is where it gets tricky. If you have trauma, trauma bars grief. Because the very nature of trauma is that it hijacks the brain, and it's unprocessed, a powerfully unprocessed emotion.
Yes.
So what happens is, if a person is trying to breathe, and then all of a sudden they get floods in with this traumatic experience, pretty soon it either puts them into a panic attack or something like that, and they're like, I can't do that. I can't look at that. That's too much. And then it stops the grieving process. It stops the grieving process. And so grieving never happens. The trauma's there barging in, disturbing the process. And then you start to get these symptoms. Because here's the thing is, what I learned from the Vietnam vets and the World War II vets is it never goes away. Because probably in the early, when I first got into it, Vietnam vets started flooding into the VA, like coming in for mental health with very acute symptoms. I mean, very acute. And we're like, it's been 45 years. How is it that is this acute? How did you ever live a normal life?
Yeah.
What we were finding out was they were all retiring.
Oh.
And as they retired, the very thing they were using to cope, to keep the box shut, is once they retired, they didn't have that thing to keep the box shut anymore.
Yes, keep
broke
them busy
wide
and
open.
Oh, wow, that's huge. And another
they just-
piece that I've seen so much along the way is when all of the things you just described start happening, too often they turn to drugs or alcohol or something else to ease those symptoms, and then that becomes another level of problems.
So at the end of the show, I tell you what, you've been fantastic. I tell you what, always tune in Monday through Friday. James Cooley Show, It's Your Life. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. It's your life, and we'll see you then.
Thank you, Dylan. We're wonderful.
Liberty Tobacco of San Diego